One of New York's last remaining Gilded Age mansions was carved up into apartments before becoming an embassy. The exterior has appeared in movies and television, but the original interior was far more breathtaking. Hi everyone, Ken here. We'll run through the history, then see the incredible lost Stanford White interiors. Hit that subscribe button, and let's explore this house. This video is brought to you in part by Victorian Society in America. More on them later. In 1876, Payne Whitney was born in New York City into a family already swimming in money and power. His father was William Collins Whitney, a brilliant and charming lawyer who served as a United States Secretary of the Navy and modernized the American fleet, and his mother was Flora Payne. On his mother's side came the truly staggering fortune, for her brother, Colonel Oliver Hazard Payne, had been an early treasurer of John D. Rockefeller's Standard Oil and turned that stake into one of the greatest fortunes of the age. That family wealth curdled into a famous feud after Flora passed away in 1893 and William remarried, an act that so outraged Oliver that the two men never spoke again, and the colonel pressed the Whitney children to choose sides, promising his fortune to those who came with him. Payne sided with his uncle, and the choice would make him extraordinarily rich, leading to him eventually inheriting $63 million from Oliver alongside roughly $25 from his father's estate. In 1902, he married Helen Hay, the accomplished poet and daughter of Secretary of State John Hay, who had once been Abraham Lincoln's private secretary. Payne proved a shrewd businessman in his own right, sitting as a director or officer of the Great Northern Paper Company, the First National Bank of New York, the Whitney Realty Company, and the Northern Finance Corporation, with holdings across banking, tobacco, railroads, mining, and oil. Now, the house that would hold all his grandeur began with a gift. A month after the wedding, in March 1902, Colonel Payne bought a lot on the east side of Fifth Avenue between 78th and 79th Streets, and announced that a mansion would rise there for his favorite nephew and his bride. The New York Times reported that the completed present would be worth not less than $1 million. Cook, who controlled the entire block and insisted it hold only fine private homes of light-colored stone, sold a neighboring plot for a second house, and the celebrated firm of McKim, Mead & White took both commissions, with Stanford White himself taking charge of 972 Fifth Avenue. White filed plans for a granite and marble house estimated at $195,000 in September 1902, but the project stretched on for years as he scoured Europe for antiques and architectural treasures, a spending spree that added roughly $1 million to the cost. Construction dragged so long that both Whitney children, Joanne and John, were born before the family could move in, and Helen once grumbled to White that she felt like chucking the whole thing and buying a ready-made house. Then came the shock that no one could have foreseen. In June 1906, with the house nearly finished, White was shot dead on the rooftop theater of his own Madison Square Garden by Harry Thaw, and the architect never saw the residence completed. The Whitneys had already begun living in the not-quite-finished house by 1906, but the final work carried on without its creator, and the mansion was not truly done until 1909. The finished exterior is one of the most refined on Fifth Avenue, a 5-story facade of gray granite quarried in Bethel, Vermont, designed in the high Italian Renaissance style and bowed gently outward toward the avenue in a graceful curve. That curve was no accident, because White made the front continuous with the neighboring house so that the two would read as a single stately composition. Rusticated stone at the base, round arch windows with winged cherubs in the spandrels, and tiers of paired pilasters give the front a richness that many consider one of White's finest mature works. Before we head inside, a quick word about the sponsor of today's video, Victorian Society in America. Are you captivated by historic architecture? Want to explore, learn, and dive even deeper into the past? With the Victorian Society in America, you'll have the chance to travel to American cities and tour stunning 19th century buildings, pursue learning through internationally acclaimed summer programs in American cities and abroad, including Chicago, Newport, and London to name a few. Additionally, members will enjoy a free subscription to 19th Century, the semi-annual publication packed with articles on art, architecture, preservation awards, and book reviews. Visit the website below in the video description and become part of the Victorian Society in America today. Thank you, Victorian Society in America, for sponsoring this video. Now back to our tour. Step through the heavy wrought iron and bronze entrance doors and you enter a circular domed rotunda ringed by 16 marble columns arranged in pairs. Its ceilings painted by muralist James Wall Finn with green leaves, trellises, and medallions of playing children. At the center sits a marble fountain, and on that fountain stands the mansion's most astonishing treasure, a small marble figure that Stanford White purchased in Europe as a decorative antiquity, and that is now widely attributed as one of Michelangelo's earliest works, known as the Young Archer. From the rotunda, a wide white marble staircase fitted with a beautifully wrought bronze rail and a carved wood ceiling sweeps up towards the grand rooms of the second floor. Just off the rotunda lies the room Helen loved best, the reception room she christened the Venetian Room, and it is a genuine museum piece. Here White lined the walls with mirrored panels framed in gold leaf, crowned them with a latticework cove twined with enameled porcelain flowers, and filled the space with painted furniture and antique European pieces, so that guests waited in a shimmering jewel box before being taken upstairs. Elsewhere on the main floor were Payne's private quarters of business and leisure, including his library, which served as a study and office and was dressed in brocade walls, a carved wood ceiling, and a Baroque-style doorway. Nearby, the more intimate breakfast room offered a cheerful contrast, decorated in a bright color scheme with a mantel and paneling in the delicate Louis XVI style. The dining room was a room built for grand entertaining, with a deeply coffered ceiling and hanging lamps suspended above a fine tapestry. Below and behind these showy rooms ran the working heart of the house, a service world that in a 40-room mansion with 2 elevators, 11 bathrooms, and both a basement and a sub-basement included the kitchen and pantries linked to the dining room by 3 dumbwaiters installed in 1905. Climbing the marble stair, one arrives at the second floor landing and the mansion's principal reception spaces, the marble room and the adjoining ballroom, arranged in a graceful sequence that let the family lead guests smoothly from one gilded space to the next. Above these floors were the family's private rooms, the bedrooms, and guest chambers, decorated in lighter woods and imported furnishings and served by a household that the 1920 census recorded as 15 live-in servants. Among the upper rooms was a studio for Helen the poet, a quiet retreat with a gently arched ceiling and sparsely decorated walls, a place suited to a woman who had published several volumes of verse before turning her attention to racehorses. Payne's own story ended with sudden startling swiftness. In 1927, at Greentree, the family's estate in Manhasset on Long Island, he was playing tennis when he was stricken and passed suddenly of acute indigestion at the age of 51, collapsing on the court and gone within about 25 minutes, a shock the New York Times carried on its front page the next morning. The estate he left behind was appraised at over $178 million, which the New York Times declared the largest estate ever appraised in this country up to that time, and it produced a record death tax of some $20 million, along with enormous charitable bequests, including the funds that established the Payne Whitney Psychiatric Clinic at New York Hospital and Cornell's Medical College. Helen remained in the great house on Fifth Avenue, hosting charity bazaars and fashion shows and continuing to run Greentree until her own passing there in 1944, having so cherished the Venetian Room that she made her son promise to remove and preserve it, and its pieces were packed into 75 crates and stored at Greentree. She left the mansion to her son John, known as Jock, who sold it in 1949 to a developer that briefly carved it into apartments, and in 1952 the Republic of France purchased the building, reportedly at the urging of the anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss, to hold the cultural services of the French embassy. The New York City Landmarks Preservation Commission designated 972 Fifth Avenue as an official city landmark in 1970, praising it as one of the last remainders of an age of elegance, and later folded it into the Metropolitan Museum Historic District. In 1997, Jock's widow Betsy Cushing Whitney donated the crated Venetian Room back to the house, and after a careful restoration, it returned to its original place, while the accidental Michelangelo was authenticated in the same decade and sent on loan to the Met in 2009. In 2014, the French opened Albertine, a 2-floor bookstore and reading room, and it remains the only French-language bookshop of its kind in New York. Today, the mansion is partly open to the public, its rotunda, bookstore, and restored Venetian Room, welcoming visitors into one of the last great Gilded Age houses still standing on Fifth Avenue. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. What did you think about the Payne Whitney house? Let me know down below in the comments section. I'd also like to say a huge thank you to Victorian Society in America for sponsoring this video. Check out their link in the video description to find out how you can get involved today. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time on This House.